On the 4th of July, when I was 15, my uncle's family was hosting a party at their house, something we did every year as our annual family get-together. For some context, they live on a quiet farmhouse in Kansas, surrounded by cornfields, the perfect place to have our own big fireworks show. My family and our extended family from one side all arrived, along with all my cousins early that afternoon. I spent most of the day in my cousin's room with some of my other relatives, playing my uncle's Nintendo 64, as my parents never let me have one. As the sun was just starting to set, we all gathered around the dining room table, eating a spread of barbecue foods, grilled burgers, hot dogs, corn on the cob, and all the classic 4th of July stuff. My youngest cousin, Tommy, was the first to finish his meal and ran off into another room. My mom instructed me to go bring him back to the table. I walked into the living room expecting to see him on the couch, but he wasn't there. I noticed the backyard motion detecting lights had turned on, signaling movement. I stepped onto the back patio and looked around the yard, calling his name. It was dark out there, and the lights didn't reach that far into the darkness, so if he was out there, I couldn't see him. I continued yelling his name, but got no response, so I went around to the side of the house to see if he was there. Sure enough, I found him standing against the edge of the cornfield looking in. I pulled him back and asked what he was doing. He replied, "I was just talking to that man." Confused, I pressed him further, asking him, "What man?" He said there was a tall man standing in the cornfield. I glanced over into the field, but didn't see anything. "Come on, let's go back inside," I told him, deep down feeling a sense of unease. Returning to the dining room table, I told my dad about the incident. However, he dismissed it, focusing on his conversation with the adults. After dinner, we got out ice cream and various desserts as we awaited my uncle's annual fireworks show. After which, I'd all but completely forgotten about this supposed man in the cornfield. As it got to about 10 p.m., most people began to leave as they had long drives back home ahead of them. My family would be staying the night. Later, my two cousins and I were staying up playing Nintendo 64 in my cousin Jackson's room. Tommy had to go to sleep, so it was me, Jackson, and my other cousin Jared. We had to keep the volume low as people were sleeping in just the other room. This allowed us to hear something from the backyard. We all exchanged anxious glances with each other. Jackson approached the window, but suddenly ducked down. We asked him what he was doing. He said there was some guy on the swing set in the backyard. I didn't want to believe him, but I also knew Jackson wasn't the kind of guy to joke about something like this. My army crawled to the window and quickly peered out of it to look for myself. Sure enough, there was a dark figure sitting on one of the swings, swinging back and forth, which is where the noise was coming from. I tried to duck down before he noticed, but he had already turned his head up towards me. Laying on the floor, we whispered to each other, desperately trying to find any logical explanation. But the figure was too tall to be any of our parents. After a few seconds, we realized the squeaking from the swing had stopped. We were too afraid to look out of the window, so we just laid on the floor for another 5 minutes or so. We then agreed that someone should check if he was still there. I slowly sat up to take another look. The man was now standing in the grass, staring up at me with this wide, open-mouthed smile. I didn't know what to do, so I opened the window and started yelling threats at him, to which he gave no reaction, instead just kept smiling. We all ran down the hall to wake up our parents. Amidst the commotion, Tommy had woken up and walked over to the window. He started telling us that it was the same man from earlier in the cornfield. I took another look out the window. The man then turned around and sprinted back into the tall corn stalks. By the time our parents had gotten outside, the man was gone. They ran around the backyard for a bit, yelling out threats into the darkness, but despite even searching part of the cornfield, they never found anything. It took around an hour for everyone to calm down, at which point our parents told us all to go back to bed. We never saw that guy again. Today I'm much older, and the whole situation still remains extremely creepy to me. It's still a common topic among our annual family gatherings to this day. This happened almost a decade ago now. I was 17 at the time and going into my senior year of high school. It was the 4th of July, and one of my friends was holding a massive party at his house, with practically everyone in our class going. I won't bore you with the details, so just imagine your typical high school party. It was about 2 a.m. when things were starting to die down. I was about to leave with another friend of mine who lived on the same block as me. I didn't have a license yet at that point, and neither did he, so we planned to walk back together. The walk was only about 25 minutes. We said our goodbyes and started walking. The road was predictably empty at that hour, with no one but us on the sidewalk and the occasional car passing by. My friend wanted to pick up a pack of cigarettes, so we took a slight detour and stopped at a 24-hour gas station. When we got there, it was nearly empty. In fact, the only person we saw when we walked in was the guy working the register. When we went back out, however, we did see someone. It was a guy, maybe late 20s, had dark hair and was pretty short, but had a filled-out build. He put his hand up, trying to get our attention as he started walking towards us. He asked if he could get a light for his cigarette. After we did, he thanked us, and so we began walking away. But the guy followed us and asked where we were going. We told him that we had just left our friend's party for the night and were heading back home. He said something about him and his friends holding a party, and how they were having this massive firework display. He asked us if we wanted to join them. This is officially the point where I started questioning this guy's authenticity. Why would a guy in his 20s ask 2 teenage boys to join him and his friend's party and firework display? And at 2 a.m. no less. We told him bluntly that we didn't even know who he was, nor would we know anyone at the party, so we said no. He started laughing and told us that we needed to loosen up, that he just thought we looked like a couple of cool guys that would want to join. I was planning to leave it there, but he then continued to try and convince us, saying that there would be alcohol and a ton of girls. The guy was honestly starting to sound concerningly desperate to get us to go with him. I firmly, straight up told him, "Dude, we're not going anywhere with you." He got annoyed and started berating us for being unfriendly and inconsiderate. We just told him to leave us alone and walked away from the encounter. We both agreed that he was probably drunk or high on something. We were 5 minutes into walking down the street again, when we hear a car behind us slowing down to match our pace. We looked back and it was a white van. As it got closer, the driver's side window rolled down, revealing the same guy from the gas station. He tells us that we got off on the wrong foot and again asks us to come to his party. The censored version of what we said was just no. In reality, we used a lot stronger language to get our point across. The guy was silent for a few seconds, and then said, "One way or another, you're coming with us." The van's back slide door opened, revealing 2 other men with pistols pointed in our direction. Looking back, this might not have been the smartest move, but we turned and ran into a nearby park. We looked behind us in horror. The 3 of them were now out of the van and running after us. They were gaining on us, so we ran to the park's public bathroom, which thankfully was open. We locked the door behind us. We desperately tried to catch our breaths as our hearts were pounding. There was no way they didn't see us go in here. Sure enough, after a few seconds, someone started pounding on the door. It sounded like they were throwing their whole body at it. We called the cops and in a whisper told them where we were. They arrived minutes later. As soon as the sirens could be heard, the pounding on the door stopped. One of the things I noticed after exiting the bathroom was how much of a dent they left on the door trying to get it open. That door's any weaker and we would have been dead. We told the cops as much as we knew. My friend and I still talk about it to this day. We've tried to comprehend what they wanted to do with us. Rob us, hurt us, worse. We don't know and we likely never will. All we can do is speculate. This incident has made me much more cautious of my surroundings. It's actually what pushed me to get my driver's license. I don't walk anywhere anymore, especially not at night. It was the 4th of July. Our family and some of our family friends were preparing a small get-together at our apartment complex. We had a small set of fireworks we planned to set off in the street once it got dark. Just as the sun was beginning to set, my daughter and her friends started begging for sparklers. They're those sticks you can hold that burn at one end, slowly giving off light. I could tell they were really excited about it, so I agreed to make the quick trip to Walmart to get a pack of them before it got completely dark outside. I hopped in my car and drove to the nearest Walmart. The store was pretty empty considering it was the night of the 4th of July. As I stepped out of my car and locked it, I noticed a man standing near the shopping cart drop-off area. He stood only a few feet away, pacing back and forth. I felt a bit uneasy, but ultimately ignored him and walked towards the Walmart entrance. The area had its fair share of junkies, so it wasn't that concerning. It took me a minute to find the sparklers, but once I did, I quickly made my way to the self-checkout. As I headed back to my car, to my surprise, the same man I'd seen earlier was still there, pacing back and forth by my car. I tried not to pay too much attention to him, and focused on getting to my car and locking the doors. I started the engine, but when I looked up, I froze. The man was now standing right in front of my car, completely still. He had his head down. I could now see he was in his early 20s. He had a large jacket on and a dirty pair of jeans. He was blocking my car from leaving the parking spot. I rolled down my window just enough to talk through it. "Hey man, can I help you?" After a few seconds, he looked up at me and asked if I knew anything about engines. I mustered the truth and said, "Not much, sorry." He stared at me for what felt like an eternity, his emotionless eyes piercing into mine. He then told me he thought his car's battery was dead and asked if I could help him. I shook my head and told him there's nothing I could do and that I didn't really know anything about cars. Which wasn't a lie, I actually don't. I took the car out of park, hoping it would get the guy to move. But he remained in front of my car, blocking my way out. I locked eye contact with the guy, hoping he would take the hint. But he didn't budge. Instead, his gaze shifted towards something behind me. I instinctively looked at my rearview mirror and saw a person wearing a ski mask sneaking around the side of my car. Without hesitation, I accelerated forward. The man stepped back and moved to the side. He reached for something in his jacket pocket, but I was gone before I could see what it was. As I sped to the parking lot exit, I glanced up at the rearview mirror. The two men chased me for a bit before giving up. To my surprise, 3 other guys emerged from the bushes near where my car had been parked, following the first 2 men. It became evident that I had just dodged an extremely dangerous and possibly life-threatening situation. I remember watching every car behind me as I drove back home, making sure I wasn't being followed. I figured I'd wait to tell anyone about what had happened till after the night was over so as not to kill the mood. I ended up never actually telling anyone, ever. It had already happened and I made it out fine, so I figured what was the use in causing any unnecessary panic? This is actually the first time I've ever told anyone about this story.